Hello viewers, Super GT here. So recently on Gran Turismo Sport, they added in a wet daily race, as you can see here. Now this turned out to be one of the most difficult races for a while, and we're going to jump in and find out exactly why. Now, the first race here, we're going to jump in to my American account. So that means whipping out Mr. R4M Scott Speed, the fastest man in the world. Okay, so we've gone for the NSX, which is a very good car for the launch. Away from the line, as you can see, it's a grid start. Now the Porsche there having an absolutely torrid time, trying to get some traction down onto the wet surface. So he loses a bunch of positions. Now into the first corner, Lassour's hairpin. As you can see, he's actually fairly tame. I was expecting all manner of death and destruction, which simply just did not happen. So big shout out to all these drivers here who managed to negotiate that first corner without killing each other, which is just really heartwarming to see. So up through Eau Rouge and Radion over the top of the hill, this nice gap appears here. I'm just going to put myself into it and move up 3 positions. How about another one? Into the slipstream of the Brazilian. Thank you very much. I'm going to take 9th. So we started 15th, up 6 positions already in the first minute, first couple of corners of racing, so I'll quite happily take that. We are going to skip through this race fairly quickly just to give you an idea of how it pans out. So this American here had a torrid time on the exit of that corner and lost a crucial amount of momentum, losing position. Now this is where things began to unravel for me. I was making a really good start here up into 8th, braked a tiny bit too late, hit the apex, but also hit the other driver. So completely my fault. So I wanted to slow down here and let him go back past, but I think he was more intent on trying to hit me rather than actually go back past, which actually cost him time. But there you go. So yes, we murdered a Canadian who did not ask to be murdered, but then again, most people don't really ask to be murdered, do they? It's not really murder then, is it? Or is it? I don't know. I don't know what this stipulation is about that. But anyway, that's kind of besides the point. So we go back past this dude. So we were in 8th. We dropped to 13th. And we have to try and make progress once again. So I caught up with the Canadian for the second time. Brazilian driver there with the penalty. Also a little bit wide, so we go back past him. And coming out of this corner onto the back straight, the Canadian has a huge moment and exits stage right to say hello to Barrier, and this guy exits stage left to say hello to Barrier. Or not quite, he doesn't quite actually meet him there. So we gain a couple of positions, but it kind of just gives you an indication of how easy it is to lose control of the car. Very, very easy. So we go back past this guy, we're going to go up into 8th position. And the guy in front was about 6 seconds ahead at this point. So it's quite a big gap. But by the end of lap 6, managed to get that gap down, as you can see here. This kind of shows you the importance of getting a good exit. So getting on the power at the right time in the right gear. You can see that he doesn't quite do it, and he loses quite a lot of time, probably a second or more than a second there, just by not getting on the power at the right moment. So we eventually finished that race in 7th. It was fairly good fun. But we want to get over onto the Super GT European account and see what we can do with the big dogs of EMEA. So starting at the back this time. Now I wondered here, right, I went really wide, I had a poor start, really poor start, went down to 20th, got myself a penalty, someone span off there. Then I realised I'm still on the intermediate tyre, so don't make that mistake. So this race was a complete write-off, basically pointless. So we joined back again for the next one. And this one, I put in a really good qualifying time, which I'll show you after this race. But as you can see, we're at the front of the grid, or second, sharp end, front row. So let's see what we can do from the front end of the grid. Of course, starting the race with 1 traction control, and then just taking it off into the first corner. So we have a car on our inside, we can't really take the apex. Gonna have to leave some space and just try and slot in behind the Spaniard here. So that's about as good as we could have really hoped for the first corner. It's really a case of just not dying. I think if you can avoid death in most circumstances, then that's probably ideal. So coming up through Eau Rouge, Radion, over the crest, onto the Kemmel Straight. Now into the slipstream, obviously you get a lot of spray. We can still see the car ahead. You can try and tuck in, follow as closely as possible. He's going to cover the inside. Fair enough. We're going to move to the left, hit our braking marker board, the 150. Not much I can do around the outside there. Could fight it around the outside here, but we're just going to try and live to fight another day here for the time being. It's only lap 1. Still plenty of time to try and get an overtake done here. So down the hill, looking up the inside, just trying to get into the apex nice and early. He actually drives a bit wider than he would have liked. Can I nip underneath on the way out? Not quite. It is actually very difficult to overtake in these conditions. That's the thing I found, because of how easy it is to overcook the brakes and slide further than you'd want going into a corner. You can't really just put it up the inside, outbrake someone, and then just overtake them. You have to be very measured and very patient with how you overtake in this race, in the wet conditions. It really does feel very greasy wet. It's a very weird sort of slippery, and you do have to be very, very careful indeed. It's very easy to lose control of the car just for it to start sliding, and you perhaps don't correct it in time, or you overcorrect and then you start spinning. So very, very easy to lose control of the car. It might look fairly easy for those who haven't really played it, but I can assure you that you're only ever sort of a millisecond away from losing complete control of the car. So you do have to be very, very alert. And I know it's not a street circuit, but when Jolyon Palmer said you have to be alert on a street circuit, it also just applies to Spa in the wet. That's really also what he meant. So through Blanchimont, first time around, still in second. We haven't lost anything, we haven't gained anything, but that's okay. Into the final chicane, we're just trying to keep it nice and solid here. Both of us actually overcook the braking point there, and we now have a Belgian on our outside, at least temporarily. So you can see just how close it is between the top 3 there. I am the meat in the top 3 sandwich, going into the first corner for the second time. Just covering off the inside slightly, just park it on the apex, get the rotation, then it's all about trying to get that smooth exit. You see there, I was just having a bit of a slide, and as a result, the leader just managed to edge away slightly. So he just opens up that gap. We've got to make sure we get Eau Rouge correct here, otherwise he's going to break the toe. That's absolutely what we don't want. Over the top of the hill, maximising the track limits as much as possible to get a really good drive onto this back straight. We're being chased by the Belgian in the Honda, and we have to make sure that we keep him behind as long as possible. We want to ideally get into first before we drop into third. So the leader is in the Audi R8. So a couple of different car choices available. Well, I mean, you can choose from any of the Group 3 cars, but there's only going to be a few that are really actually worth using. The R8 is certainly one of them. The NSX also very good. NSX probably the best one for most people to use. Good launch off the line, given that it is a grid start race. So through the downhill right hand, you can see still very close between the top 3. So just waiting and probing for this opportunity, and just trying to put this pressure on to this leader to make him perhaps make a mistake, an unforced error, or perhaps a forced error you could say. So into Pouhon, bottom of the hill, just trying to keep it nice and patient. This is a prime opportunity for losing control of the car on the exit here. Just trying to maximise track limit. You can see the R8 kind of squirming all over the place on the exit of the corner. We actually gained slightly on the brakes as well. Decent on the brakes is the NSX. So through the Fania chicane, up into third gear, you have to make sure your gear choice is correct. Often just shifting up very early, or taking corners in a gear higher than you normally would, just to limit the wheel spin on the corner exit. So onto the back straight, crucial kind of section here as we lead in towards the final chicane of the lap, which is a very good overtaking opportunity. So tuck into the slipstream. You see the Belgians just dropped off on home soil here at Spa. So we're just going to try and break the toe if possible. That would be ideal. If we can break away as a pair and make it a battle between the 2 of us rather than 3 of us, then you're always just increasing your chances of winning or having a better result. So it might be time to try and work together with the Spaniard. So he overshoots the corner, but he doesn't take it too bad. I mean, he still lost at least half a second there, I'd say. And you can see, as a result, right onto the back of him as we begin the third lap, setting a 2:44.4. That's a decent lap time there. If you can get into the 2:44s in the race, you're doing very well. If you get into 2:43s, then that is very, very good pace, like really solid pace. But it's very easy just to lose half a second or even a second just from one tiny mistake. So every tiny thing you do in the rain really, really matters, like a huge amount. I've probably said that already, but I'll say it again. Over the top of the hill, onto the Kemmel Straight. Very good opportunity for an overtake here. Look how close I am. I'm going to get into the slipstream. Is he going to cover the inside like he did on lap 1? Yes, he is. We're going to look for it. It's not quite a car width. Could go on the grass like Alex Albon did all those years ago. But we're going to have to go side by side around the outside. And he's left me space. So it's good racing between the two of us. Still side by side into the final part of the chicane. And again, still next to each other. We're going to drive downhill here. This is where things could go wrong. Look at the three of us battling very closely indeed. The Belgians back into the fight. Need to just try and keep this one around the outside if possible. And then I will have the inside for this left-hander here. And finally, after about 5 corners of fighting side by side, I'm going to take the lead. Just kind of shows you how difficult it is to actually gain positions here. But I'm sure the Spaniard isn't over here, isn't quite done with this fight. So he's going to try and fight this one back as soon as possible. But now we're into the lead. Okay, the race has very much changed. No one in front. I have clear air, no spray. I have a clear view of the circuit. But I do have pressure from behind, so I need to make sure that we just stick to our braking zones and don't overcook anything. Do not overcook, otherwise you're going to lose a couple of positions here. And that is very easy to do. A little bit wide there, but we just regather the car mid-corner and get a decent-ish drive. We're trying to get a good drive off this turn here, maximise the track limits as much as possible without going over them. So the top 3 still very, very close indeed. Look at it. You can see all 3 of us very, very close indeed. A bit of a gap back to 4th at this point. But one mistake could mean I've dropped 2 positions. So we still have to be very, very careful indeed. Through Blanchimont, Spaniard getting very, very close through that corner. And he's on the outside here. He's going to try and fight this one side by side. And I'm just going to nip in ahead. He's still there. I have to give him the space actually. And then that's going to compromise the pair of us on the exit. As you can see, 3 abreast across the start line as we begin the 4th lap. So there we are. Look at that picture there. 3 abreast into the first corner. Try not to overcook the corner. Park it on the apex. Get the rotation. And we're just going to keep the position. So in that scenario there, it's really a case of just not panicking. I know my braking zone. I'm on the inside. Just brake where I know I need to brake. And then the corner should come to you and everything should go well, and it did. So through Eau Rouge, top of the hill, onto the Kemmel Straight for the 4th time. So this is going to be, again, opportunity for overtaking, this time the other way around. I'm just taking a look in the rearview mirror, there he is. At the last moment, I'm going to move over to the right-hand side to protect the inside. Is he going to fight this one around the outside? He tries it, but he doesn't quite make it work. Well, he's still there. We're going to be side by side here. But I'm going to have to take this corner a little bit quicker to try to slot in ahead, and we managed to do it. A little bit of a moment there. We're going to move to the right, go to the inside. They're not really going to be able to go around the outside here. He's a little bit too far back for that. But he does actually manage to nip underneath because I slightly overslide the racing line. Now through the left-hander here, we're going to try and regain supremacy of the race and retake the lead. He actually ends up going slightly wide onto the AstroTurf, and he surrenders second, who now that position belongs to the Belgian. So the Spaniard's not quite there now, but the Belgian very much is. So the race continues, still under an immense amount of pressure on the 4th lap. We're about halfway into this race, and we're still very, very close indeed. So it does make for very tense racing, I must say, when it comes to the wet weather. Sometimes it can be very boring. I've had very many boring races in the rain because sometimes it just spreads out and no one can really gain on each other, and then sometimes even if you do gain on each other, it can be hard to overtake. So at this point here, we just need to make sure we stick to our guns, stick to our braking zones, stick to our racing lines. I feel as though I've got the better measure of these guys. They are obviously quick, but if I just do what I know and try and lap properly, then I should be okay. Now coming into here, we're about half a second ahead of second. Just look at the radar, he just slightly brakes too late. Goes a little bit too wide on the first apex. That is horribly going to compromise his exit out of this part here. And as a result, you can see he loses nearly a second just from that one mistake, from maybe braking 5-10 meters too late. So now, when we cut to this shot, you can see I've got a bit of a gap. And for the first time in the race, I've got a bit of breathing room, and I don't have to worry about immediately being overtaken. So we have a 1.5 second margin to second. So really now a case of just, okay, get your head down, set some quick laps, just keep that gap and make sure that the guys behind don't get back into the slipstream. Then hopefully they'll start fighting, the gap will open up a little bit more. So we're going to try and pull away through this section here, just trying to set some nice qualifying laps if you like. But we do have to worry about the tyre wear. As the race goes on, the tyres do get worse, it becomes harder. So the gap 1.7 at the end of lap 5, beginning of lap 6. And this is something I was measuring throughout the race. So the gap at 1.9 here through Blanchemont on the way in. And then on the way out, the gap came down to about 1.6. So just by looking at that gap and measuring that, I began to realise actually, whoa, I'm taking that corner too slow. I need to go quicker through that turn. He's in the same car as me, so there's no excuse for me to take it that slow. So I was actually conserving too much speed and not carrying enough momentum on the way in. So that's something you can always do, just take a look at gaps through certain corners on the way in, on the way out, just see if you're losing time in certain places or gaining time in certain places. But certainly if you're losing time, then you need to try and correct that as quickly as possible. This is lap 7, the final lap. By this point the tyres are fairly worn. We've gone fully to the front in terms of brake bias to really preserve the rear tyres as much as possible. Car squirming about on the exit of the corner there, but we keep it gathered up and keep it together into the final corner. This is the last thing, the last possible obstacle that could trip us up, but we managed to hit the apex quite nicely, and by this point we're fairly comfortable in where we need to brake for each corner. And after all of that, after nearly 20 minutes of racing, it's going to be a first place in very treacherous conditions. At any moment could have just made one mistake and lost the position. And ultimately it was a very good race, very good battling with the Belgian there and the Spaniard. Really, really good fun. And it turns out to be my 219th victory on this account. So pretty good indeed. Here is my qualifying lap for those interested. It ended up being a 2 minutes 43.2, which I think is a very comfortable lap. It's inside the top 100 in the region. And I think it was inside the top 200 in the world at the time of doing it. So across the line, obviously you need to get a good exit from the chicane. Looking out for the end of the wall on the left here, where there's an indent there. So it's before the 100 board, and you're going to just pivot on the apex here in first gear. And then on the exits of the corners, you don't want to be full power instantly. You need to gently get that power on over the course of 1 or 2 seconds. Through here, up the hill, getting on the power as soon as you meet the apex. You really have to get on the power very early, but you do have to take the correct line in meeting the apex. Looking for the 150 board here into the Les Combes chicane, braking a tiny bit after it, and then just coasting the car in at the later phases of the braking zone. So that's something really important in this wet weather, to brake at the right point, but then also to start turning the car in towards the apex at the right time as well. So really think about those two things. So you see here, just turning the car in quite nice and early, getting towards the apex nice and early, to make sure we do get into the corner and don't sail past the apex. So this middle sector, crucial, lots of corners. You do have to get your turning in point dead right to the edge of the curb, so making sure we maximise track limits as much as possible. Braking about halfway between the start of that curb and the 50 board, and then that should see you into Pouon quite nicely. Accelerating halfway through, taking a bit of a break, then back on the power on the exit. Again, maximising track limits, back over to the left. Looking for the 100 board, which is the second board. then that gets you into this corner quite nicely. And then up to third gear for the second part, and then for the traction. So third gear just helps you accelerate basically. In second gear, too low of a gear, you start getting too much wheel spin. So you'll be very conscious of that. So you can see there, we're going to shift up into third quite early. And then here it's really a case of getting a nice exit. So my best lap at this point, 2:44.1. I'm about 7 or 8 tenths up on that time. So I know that if I just take this last section nicely, then I'm going to improve. So through Blanchimont, perhaps took it a little bit safe, and that was the thing I was doing in the race as well, just not quite carrying enough pace. Then there's a white line that goes across the track just after the gantry, and that's where you want to brake. Using lots of curb on the first apex, some on the second, and then again just gently applying the power on the exit before going full power. Crossing the line for a 2:43.2. Solid lap time, pretty happy with it. Let me show you one more race, right, because this was an example of withstanding pressure. Now Yeet Master there, he said, Super GT, I'm coming for you. I said, okay. Well, I didn't even say okay, I just, in my head I said okay. Turns out he was starting 15th in the race, so I didn't really think too much of it. I was starting in pole position, so I thought, okay, well, let's just race our own race and see what happens. At the beginning of this one, we actually didn't get the best of launches, the Italian getting through, but he kind of just, again, overcooks the corner. So lots of overcooking going on here in the rain at Spa. So we actually managed to regain the lead. This was a little bit of tactical driving, so I didn't want the gap to be too big going into Raidillon here, so I just braked a little bit early just to close the gap up to the car behind so that they couldn't really get a good slipstream. And actually that really worked because the gap opened up to about 7 or 8 tenths, as you can see there. So we pull away. End of lap number 1. Yeet Master's already up into 7th, so quite an ominous sign that he's actually very quick, and he perhaps wasn't lying about trying to hunt me down in this race. So we meet the apex of the chicane, nicely done. A couple of laps later, so the end of lap 2, I set a 2:45.4. Italian goes slightly quicker. Yeet Master goes a couple of tenths quicker. Didn't think much of it. End of the next lap, he goes and does a 2:43.9. And there's me doing 2:45.4s. So he's a good second and a half quicker. Now, normally I could do 2:44s in the race, but I wasn't quite up to it in this race for whatever reason. And by lap 6, as you can see, he managed to catch up all the way from 15th place. So if you do have the pace, then you can certainly make your way through the order. But I suppose this is a lesson in withstanding the pressure. And it's really a case of just driving the racing line the best you can. If you cave into the pressure by braking a bit too late, by trying to cater to the other driver, then that's where the mistakes will creep in, and that's where they'll get past you. So all I need to do here is brake in the places where I know I should brake, take the racing line, take the lines I know that are best, and then just not really worry too much about the other guy. If I just do those things, there's not much they can do to try to get past. You can try it here, into the final chicane, braking on the white line where I should do, and he's just a little bit wide there, so he's not going to be able to get past. So if he wants to try around the outside, he's going to have to really judge it absolutely perfectly, and it's much harder to do in the rain than it is in the dry. So through Raidillon for the final time in this race, this is probably one of the best overtaking opportunities on the lap at the end of the Kemmel Straight, and it's going to be a drag race between the two of us. He perhaps caught me at the wrong moment because he doesn't get enough of a momentum run. Can't quite get that out. And he's going to try around the outside, not quite going to work. So I'm just able to keep the position, braking again on the 150 board where I know is right. And here I just look behind once there, but really just trying to meet all of the corners, not really looking behind too much. These corners, they can't really go for a pass. If you're driving well enough, there's nothing they can do really to try to get past. And then through here onto the run towards Blanchimont. We get through there just fine, and then he has one more opportunity to get past. He's going to try it again here around the outside, and he's just going to brake way too late. It kind of just shows you what happens when you brake just a few meters too late. You go sailing on into the abyss, and as a result of that, he actually gets reset, and he goes back down into third. He went that far wide. But yeah, that's kind of a good example of how to withstand the pressure. Just don't think about the pressure. Easier said than done, though, it must be said. But that's the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Get yourself subscribed if you're new to the channel. But in the meantime, have a nice day. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.